So welcome. It's always intimidating to be up after a really super good keynote speaker. But we're going to do our best today. For those who were here yesterday, the talk today is going to be 90% different. There's just a couple of slides that are the same. And those who were not here yesterday, I want to let you know I am not related to Jeff Sutherland. That's a question that comes up every Agile conference that I go to. No relation. We've never even met, though I hope to meet him at some point. That would be fun. He probably knows who I am at this point. So we'll talk about how to manage distributed teams today. And again, I'm going to use Slido, so just a couple of questions for polling. There's nothing available right now, so you'll wait till if you want to wait till the actual first poll comes up. The first two will be multiple choice, and the last one I'm going to ask, what did you take away from this presentation? So just be thinking about that as you go through, what is it that you can take back to your teams when you go back to the office next week? Or when you go back to online next week, depending on how you're working. So some managers don't allow remote working at all. There's a lot of fear about letting our employees go remote. And then there are some managers who have to work with remote teams. So that's going to take us to our first question, because I'd like to see who's in the audience today. So as a manager, I'd like to see, are you hesitant or do you have to? So let me start the first poll. And we'll take a look at what it looks like. And we'll see who's here today, hopefully, if the internet works. And it's anonymous, so feel free to be totally honest. So are you reluctant to allow people to, or you have to? Oh, and you like it. Oh, I'm so glad. So you have some of you, 33% have to work with remote teams but don't want to. Oh, we've only got a few people voting so far, so we'll wait till the... This gives you an excuse to be on your phone during the talk also. I'm super surprised. Most people have to work with remote teams and don't like it, so I'm super glad that there are some people out there that do like it. And only pardon? 24. Yeah, 24, yeah. And very few people who are reluctant to allow people to work remotely, so that's great to see. Hooray, a bunch of likers. And other. I'm very curious. We can talk about that in a bit. So let's go back. Okay, there we go. So I think most managers are worried that when they allow flexible working or when we allow people to go remote, that the work is not going to get done for some reason or another. But from the interviews that I've done and from talking to hundreds and hundreds of remote workers, burnout is far more prevalent than laziness. So it's really a weird fear that managers are always afraid that the work won't get done, but really the actual problem is that people are working way too hard and way too long, because of course we can work 24/7 and we have to put boundaries on our own time, and that is very difficult to do for many people. All the tips that I'm going to be giving you today, I'm not some expert remote working manager, so all the tips I'm going to be giving you today are from the over 100 interviews that I've done for the podcast that I've run, and from a book that I just recently published. I put all the tips and best practices together in that book. I ordered them to be here in time for the conference, and they had not arrived. So maybe by this afternoon or Wednesday, tomorrow, then they'll be here. It's 400 pages of awesome remote working tips. So for the few managers in here who are reluctant to offer flexible working, I want to just go over a few of the details over that. I think a lot of people are worried that people are going to run off and become digital nomads and travel the world, and you'll never see them again except for somewhere on a Slack chat at some point. And yes, that does happen, but not as often as you'd think. The picture here is an interview that I did with Piero Tofanen. He's a software developer in Italy who went on the road with his wife for 2 years in a camper van traveling the US, coding to pay for expenses, and just stopping to work wherever they had Wi-Fi. But by and large, most people just want a little bit of flexibility in their schedule. And in fact, most people prefer a hybrid form of remote working. So there's a few days when we're at the office talking with people, and then a few days where we're at home or somewhere else where we're getting the deep work done. And one of the examples I give is I interviewed Tom Hallett from Lean Tomato. It was a few years ago. He was an Agile coach there, and he was using remote work because he wanted to walk his daughter to school in the morning. And then he has a really beautiful garden, and so he would use, in the afternoon, he would like to take walks in his garden. And in a 2015 telework survey, 60% of employees said that they would resign to take a similar job with the same pay if they had flexible work options. So I think that is a big wake-up call for companies in terms of what people care about in their jobs. And one of the things that I think is really scary, so this is a list on my website, and I've got a tools page, collaborationsuperpowers.com/tools, and this is a list that I've collected of all of the online work sites that offer remote jobs. So right now, if your company is not offering flexibility or the ability to work from somewhere other than the office, there are a lot of places that people can go. And 10 years ago, when we just had Elance and Odesk, or Fiverr, there were low-paying jobs, but there are now very real, high-paying jobs that people can get when they're not happy with their current situation. So I think that that's a big wake-up call for managers these days. Teo Heron is a creativity expert, actually from Sweden, and he wrote this book that's in yellow. I can't pronounce it, but it's all about the freedom to work where we're most productive. And I really like some of the examples that he gave in his interview. So he says he has a twin brother, and they are exactly the same. He said his wife actually mixed them up at their wedding. And so that's how similar they are. They grew up the same, they dress the same, they really look the same. And Teo likes to do his invoicing in a really beautiful place. So he collects all of his finance and his invoice, and once a month he goes to a really beautiful place and sits in a cafe by the sea, and he does all of his invoicing there. His brother is exactly the opposite. He also does it once a month or so, but he goes to a really dark room with a room with no windows, something where it's super boring, and he does it as fast as possible in order to get it done. So they have very different styles of working, of course, but and it's nice to be able to work in the style where we're most productive. And I think that's one of the most important things, because remote workers aren't trying to escape doing work. We're trying to escape the day prison. We want to use technology to make better use of our time so that we can spend more time doing things that we love and less time stuck in traffic. So I think that's one of the most important things, is people are trying to work where they're most productive, and many managers are afraid that we're going to be lazy and watch Netflix all day. It's just not the case. And one of the most compelling reasons that I find for companies to go remote is this idea of being remote first, which is regardless if you allow people to go remote or not, you should have the processes in place to be able to work remote in case something bad happens, because something bad always happens, or maybe not bad, but there's bad weather or sick children or the plumber who comes sometime between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And work shouldn't have to stop just because these things get in the way. So the idea of companies being remote first makes the company less vulnerable and a lot more powerful and more attractive for employees. So for managers who have to work with remote teams, I think that's the majority of the audience, then the rest of the presentation is for you. So here are some tips. And the number one thing is we have to manage remote teams differently than we manage co-located teams. So we really often, I see people trying to take the same activities that we do in person and translate those directly online, and it just doesn't work. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And so let's dive into what some of those different things are. One is, as leaders, I think I like to use the word leaders better than managers, but it's kind of interchangeable today. I got very little sleep for some reason. The hotel was, anyway, lots of loud noises. So I think we have to set our teams up for success as leaders. And I think one of the first things is we have to start with trust. And easier said than done, I know, but when we start with trust, we can know that other companies have made this happen. Here's 50 of the 100 top 2018 remote work sites that FlexJobs puts out. And the numbering is all off. I didn't want to go and just renumber everything. But you can see that there are pretty big names on there. There's Amazon, there's Wells Fargo, there's Xerox. There's a bunch of companies that are making this work. And so you can trust that you can also make this work in your company. You can trust that it's possible. And trust, I feel, is built on three main components: reliability, consistency, and responsiveness. So can I rely on you to get the work done? Are you doing work in a high quality manner consistently? And can I find you if I need you? I think responsiveness is one of the biggest things, because when people don't respond, we don't usually assume the best. We assume something has happened. And it's not like, oh, I'm sure they're just working really hard somewhere and they're not responding. That's just not usually where our brain goes to. And then one of the things that I would add to this is an interview that I did with Dave Blum, who runs treasure hunts for teams. And he said that likability is really another component that you could add to this formula. If you feel like your team has your back, or if you feel like your manager has your back, that builds trust on the team. And this basic trust is really the glue that binds the team together. So start with a mindset of trust, and then build reliability, consistency, and responsiveness into everything that you do on the team. Now, I think it's another really important quality of leaders is we need to get in the mud with our team and really understand the pain that they're experiencing, especially around remote work. So join the stand-up meetings, join all the meetings, see where things are going wrong. Is it the internet connection? Is it the equipment? Where is it that we can set up our teams and help them succeed? So really getting in the mud and understanding it. And then when we have teams that work in different locations, it's sort of natural for an us versus them mentality to come up. And as leaders, that's something that we need to be highly aware of and sort of even the playing field a bit. So if a team for instance, if you have a team in the Netherlands and a team in Romania, if the team in Romania goes out to dinner, well then the team in the Netherlands can also go out to dinner. Or if you have a couple of remote employees and most people are in the office and everybody's going out for a Christmas meal, send a gift certificate to the remote employees. Treat everybody as equal and fairly as possible, because that us versus them starts to become very powerful and degrades trust on the team. Now, after starting with trust, I think having a plan to facilitate a success is the next key thing. So we can't hope for it. Hope is not going to get you where you want to go. You have to actually deliberately plan for where you want to go. And it starts by setting clear expectations. When we're in the office, we can pretty much know what everybody's doing, and we see people that are there. But if we don't have clear expectations, we have to be results only, I should say, for remote workers. We really have to focus on results. So we need to know what those results are. What does success look like? What does failure look like? And then communicate that very clearly with the team so that it's no surprise to anybody. And setting up regular feedback loops. Now, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I want to go into one of the funnest ways that I've experienced feedback on remote teams, and that is through a system called merit money. It was created, I'm not sure if it was originally created, but I learned about it through Jürgen Appelo from Management 3.0, and it's a system where it's a peer-to-peer 360 regular feedback. And the way it works is that every month, everybody on the team gets 100 points. And the only rule is you can't keep any of the points for yourself. You have to give them out to somebody, and you can give them out for whatever reason you want. And in the beginning, I hated this system because I thought, how do I know if Sergey is a good coder or if Tahira is doing the finance well? I have no idea how to do finance or coding, so I have no idea. But it's not about judging people based on their skills. It's about rewarding people based on how they are as team members. So I could give 10 points to Sergey for staying late and really helping me the other day, 20 points to Tahira for saying good morning to me every morning. I really enjoy that. And whatever it is that I want to give, 10 points to Jürgen for making me laugh. But the idea is that it's transparent how much you're giving and the reasons that you're giving it. And there's lots of tools to facilitate this. Now, in the beginning, if you set up a system like this, I don't tie it to money, because any system that can be gamed will be gamed, and when there's money attached, people tend to game the system. So when we first started this, we just used points. Actually, they called it hugs, which was even more off-putting for me. I just was like, hugs? It sounds so hippie. But so points, stars, whatever you want to use. But in the end, we did tie it to money. So a lot of companies have sort of an annual performance review and then an end-of-year bonus, and you've almost spent the bonus money before the end of the year comes. But with the merit money system, what happens is Tahira, our finance queen, will set aside a certain amount of money every month based on how much profit we've made, and then we roll the dice. And if we roll a 6, we get paid, and if we don't roll a 6, the money rolls over to the next month, and we try to roll a 6 again the next month. So it sort of accumulates over time. And at the moment, we've gone 13 months without rolling a 6, and everybody is dying to get their hands on that pool of money. Now I want to show you what it looks like when we roll the dice. So this was our team a couple of years ago. You'll recognize the loon in the middle. You'll see what I mean in just a second, but here's what it looks like when we roll the dice. Luis in the upper left is going to be the dice roller.
Okay, dice.
Oh, come on, big money, big money.
Everyone give it a kiss. Come on, lucky dice. We love you, we love you. Oh, it's a 6.
No way!
Can you see? Can you see that?
So this is what we do every month, and it's sort of our own casino system. But the thing I like about the merit money system is that it allows other people to see, or it allows us to see what our colleagues like about us. In the beginning, working for the Happy Melly team, I tried to tone down my personality a lot because I'm very enthusiastic, and I thought, oh my God, people hate this American enthusiasm, and I was trying to tone it down. But it turns out that through the merit money system, I found out that that's actually something people liked about working with me, so I felt a lot more free to be myself. On the other side of that, we had one member of the team who wasn't getting any points at all. And so he asked, like, hey, I'm doing great work. I'm making these great videos. Why am I not getting points? And it turns out the rest of the team responded with, yeah, you're doing great work, but yeah, so are we. You're not showing up to any of the team meetings or any of the team building activities. And that's kind of something that we feel is important on the team. So it was an eye-opener for him to realize that him not showing up to the team building activities was actually having a negative effect on the morale of the team. So whatever system you put in place, the important thing is that it's continuous, 360 from your peers, not top-down manager, so that we know what people like about working with us or not like working with us. The next thing as leaders I think is really important is to continue doing one-on-ones with each other. And these graphics that you're seeing, you'll see that it's episode 194. That's for the podcast. If you want to go back and listen, it's also in a blog post form. So I'm just letting you know that the resources, there's more on this. But I had a boss once who was in California and I was in the Netherlands, and he used to call me a few times a week on his way to work. And in the beginning I was like, okay, yeah, boss, what do you want? And he was like, oh, I was just calling to say hi. So he was just calling to check in and say hi, and that happened a couple times a week. And every once in a while, there'd be something that I'd want to talk about. But it's now been 7 years. I haven't worked with him for 5 years or so, and we're still friends to this day. And every once in a while, out of the blue, I still get a call from Dale saying, hey, I just wanted to say hi. So it's pretty powerful what one-on-ones can do. And we tend to do it a lot in person, but we forget about them when we go remote. And then the next thing is showing appreciation. Now, on co-located teams, I find that in companies that this is a place where we lack a lot. We say thank you, but we never really give gifts or we never really show appreciation. And there's lots of ways to do that on remote teams. So a lot of them revolve around fitness or food. It's usually one side or the other. So some of these examples is teams that have used Fitbits, for example, so tracking your steps and sleep and comparing it to your team, just to make sure that we're moving enough. Or gym memberships are great gifts. Books and courses, of course. The bucket in the middle represents house cleaning services. So if you're working from home a lot, having somebody clean your house is really a luxury, like super luxury. The coffee, there are people who send cookies through the mail. There's one woman who really liked baking cookies and would send her colleagues cookies every once in a while. And one that I mentioned yesterday is you can send a pizza almost anywhere in the world. So if you see that your employees are working really hard, go ahead and send a pizza to make sure that they're nourished, and it's good for any meal of the day, in my opinion. Like pizza for breakfast is just as good, if not better, as pizza for dinner. And then there's all kind of gift boxes, beer of the month club, wine of the month club, vegetables that you can send. I mean, you can send things online all over, and I think we can get a lot more creative with what we're doing in terms of how we say thank you. And then the hammock is one because I'm discovering a lot of apps now that instead of sending gifts, we can send experiences. So one company will draw a name out of the hat. It's like they have sort of the big bingo ball machine in their office, and they'll draw a ball every month, and inside that ball is somebody's dream vacation. And once a month, they send an employee on a dream vacation. So we don't have to necessarily go that far, but you can see that there's some really creative ways that we can reward people. I think it's very important that we celebrate success. This is my colleague Gretchen and I. We wrote a book together about 7 years ago, and after every chapter, we had virtual pie. So we went out, got our favorite piece of pie, we put on celebratory hats just for the effect, and we would hang out after every chapter and sort of have a short retrospective while eating pie, and then we would move on to the next chapter. So these kind of things are easily done online, just maybe it seems a little weird at first. Okay, so we've started with trust, we've got a deliberate plan to facilitate success. Next, it's time to engage the team in creating a team agreement. I touched on this yesterday, but I want to dive a little bit deeper today and show some examples of team agreements that teams have created. So team agreements are basically a ways of defining what normal behavior is on our team. And I think this plays a lot into the questions of culture as well, because in my opinion, culture is all about what is normal behavior. So what is normal behavior in India? What is normal behavior in the US? What's normal behavior in Russia? And we find actually that each one of us has our own user manuals, and so it's really good to define for our team what is normal behavior for our team. And one of my colleagues, Howard Espin, who built a trust building game for virtual teams called Prelude, he has this quote and he says, "Much like an orchestra tunes up before a performance or an athlete warms up before a practice, tuning a virtual team helps get everyone on the same page." And it's true, because oftentimes our teams are just thrown together and they're like, okay, go. And we're self-organized and we sort of go, but it really is good to take a step back and to define how are we going to work together. There's a couple ways to do that. Oh, first, our next poll. So I want to know how many people have team agreements in place. So let me start it up. And we'll go back. So the kind of sort of-ish, I'll let you decide what that means for you. So like either yes, you have one in place, or no, totally not, and kind of sort of-ish. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so it looks like 50% don't. And you're not alone. Whenever I give the Work Together Anywhere workshop, and I give it usually in multinational companies, almost nobody has a team agreement in place. It's just not very common. Yeah, I'll give some examples in just a second. Yeah, maybe I should have put the poll afterwards. Good for next one. This is a new presentation that I've made. So yesterday's was one I've given more, but this one's a brand new one. So okay, so it sounds like a majority don't have a team agreement in place. So here, let me give you some examples then. The first I'll give from an interview that I gave. This is Bayat Bulman. He's the head of EMEA for Evernote. And they basically, they define their etiquettes. So etiquettes are essentially behaviors. And they have etiquettes for how they behave in meetings, for how they send emails. Like for instance, they have one subject per email, or they'll change the subject line when the subject of the email changes. So no long emails, and if there's a long email, there should be a summary at the top. So they have very specific sort of rules and behaviors that they define. They have their calendar. How are they going to use their calendar? Home office. How are you going to set up your home office? Are you, I think they require an external monitor and an ergonomic chair, these kind of things. Tasks and Slack. So they've really gone through and defined their etiquettes for a lot of different things. One of my favorite ways of building a team agreement is by the ICC Workflow. This was created by Phil Montero of the Anywhere office. It's not the most sexy name, but it stands for Information, Communication, and Collaboration. So what you basically do is you go through and define what kinds of information do we need to share, how are we going to communicate together, and how are we going to collaborate? How do we know what each other are doing? And just actually having the discussion with the team about these 3 points will go a very long way. A very long way. The discussion is way more valuable than the document that you produce at the end. So I do recommend documenting your agreements somehow, however if you have a wiki or whatever you use, having it somewhere, but make sure that it doesn't become a static document. It's meant to be living. It's meant to be reviewed regularly. I recommend about every 3 months, because there's new apps being developed every day. When somebody joins your team or leaves the team, it becomes a new team, and defining that way of working is good to just revisit. So this is not like your rule sheet that remains this way forever. Another way of doing it is by using a team canvas. This is very similar to the business model canvas, and it just outlines people and roles, strengths and weaknesses, values. So you basically map out, depending on what kind of agreement you want for your team, the different areas of your team that you want to agree on. Other ways of doing it is creating, or addendums, I would say, to the team agreement would be to create a holiday calendar. I think this is particularly interesting when you're working with other cultures, because holidays are very different. Like here, you would probably never do something on the 4th of July, whereas in the US it's a major holiday. And in the Netherlands, there was one day I went into town and everything's closed, total ghost town. And it turns out it was a major holiday in the Netherlands that I had no idea about when I first moved there. So, and also holidays are a great way to learn about your team. It's all about culture. So it's a perfect way, it's about customs and food. It's a perfect way to really dive into what is normal for you in your country. And then the last thing that I like is Jürgen Appelow's Delegation Board. It's a little bit complicated to explain, so I'll just do a very brief run through, and then I recommend looking it up online. But what he's done is he's outlined on the left side in this chart the different decision areas that people have for the team. So who is allowed to select features, who's allowed to create the schedule, who's allowed to hire and fire people. And then the levels of delegation go all the way from level 1, where I, as the manager, am going to make the decision and I'm going to tell you what that decision is, all the way down to level 7, where the team can make the decision and they don't even have to inform me of what it is. So you have all these different levels of delegation, and what they do is they play a game called delegation poker. So everybody gets a set of cards, and you go through and you say, okay, for selecting features, what level of delegation do you think we should have on this team? And everybody, picks out their cards and then flips it at the same time, and you see what numbers they have, and then you have a conversation about, like, well, why would you pick 1 for that, or why would you pick 4 for that? And this just helps people know who's allowed to make the decisions on the team, and what level of decision-making authority does everybody have. So it really clarifies things. Okay, so this is where there's a little bit of overlap from yesterday, but I think that it's really important to arm your team with the right tools and training for how to use the tools. And a lot of us, we go into companies and I see a lot of iPhone microphones, there's not proper headsets. And this is a place where managers and leaders could really go a long way, is make sure your team has the proper tools in place to be able to work efficiently. And it starts with having an awesome internet connection. So as a manager, if somebody on my team wants to work from home and they have a bad internet connection at home, it's a no-go, because they need to be able to communicate regularly with the team, and what I prefer is with video. So if you can't do regular video communication, then I, as a manager, would help them get a proper internet connection so that they're able to work from home and communicate regularly with the team. So if the team somewhere in another country doesn't have a great internet connection, do whatever you can to make that happen, because that is the baseline for successful remote work, is just being able to regularly communicate with each other. And then pay attention to sound quality. So having a proper headset, not calling in from the car, or muting yourself if you're calling in from the car, making sure that we have high bandwidth communication. I mentioned yesterday I had a colleague that used to have a chirping bird cage next to her workstation, which is really cute at first, and then 20 minutes into the conversation, you're ready for the bird to be gone. So it's it sounds really easy, but it is a really serious problem, especially if we're working in open offices. The sound quality on calls is just can be really bad and distracting. And then using great equipment. So yesterday I did my Skype for Business bashing. I won't do that today, but except for to say if you're using Skype for Business, really throw it out. It's the worst tool on the market. You can use almost anything and have a better quality call. And I'm very serious about that. So, and if you're using conference rooms, Logitech has some great equipment. The USB Jabra speaker is better than most spider phones out there. Just make sure you have the proper equipment in order to communicate with your team, because online meetings with bad tech are just disasters. I mean, they're just terrible. And it doesn't have to be. And again, I think the use of video is really important. It doesn't have to be for every single meeting. If people have bad connections, just turn it on in the beginning and at the end to say hello and goodbye. But having that visual connection with our team really helps. You can tell if somebody's tired. You can tell if they want to speak. You know, they'll take the breath, so you know they can raise their hand to signify that they want to say something. Video is really crucial. The tool that you're seeing here, this is Zoom, zoom.us. It's one of my favorite video tools. There's other good ones, but Zoom is one of my favorites. You can have up to 50 people on the call at the same time, and the free version has all the features except for that it cuts you off after 45 minutes. And most people think that that's a feature rather than a bug. So, and the pro version is only $15 US a month. So, I mean, it's practically free, so there's no reason. And the mobile, I don't get any money from Zoom. I'm just a total slavish fangirl, by the way. The mobile version also works really great. And the other is to train your team. So it sounds like remote working can be really easy, but I really recommend getting some sort of basic training. If your team is struggling, then get together and take them through a training course. I offer a workshop. Judy Reese is here. She also offers online trainings. There's a number of it. It just depends on what you're looking for your team. But definitely, we train our teams on all kinds of things. And in remote working, we tend to just think, oh, they're in their pajamas. It's going to be fine. It's super easy. And really, the devil is in the details. It's all the little things that people just need to be aware of to make it work. Okay, so we've started with trust. We've created a deliberate plan to facilitate success. We've engaged the team in creating a team agreement. We've armed them the proper tools. We've thrown out Skype for Business. Just get one more jab in. And we've given them training. And then the last one is to experiment with small steps and to really adopt an experimental mindset. There's one company that decided that they wanted to try this remote working thing. And so they said, okay, in the next month, we're going to try this out. So for 2 weeks, everybody work from wherever you want, and we'll see if this remote working thing is for us. And of course, people went all over the world, all over the place. And it failed miserably because they hadn't accounted for time zones and internet connections, and nobody had a right headset. And they came back and sadly decided that remote working wasn't for them. And I was like, wait, the experiment was way too big. Like, maybe try calling in from your offices to start, or maybe just do it 1 day a week. Like, really small steps and experimentations. And again, another graph from Jürgen, which I really love. This is his celebration grid, what he calls it. And really what it is you see in the middle, we should be running experiments all the time. And we're going to fail 50% of the time, and we're going to succeed 50% of the time. But you will have the maximum learning there. So that's what that yellow part underneath really gets to. And of course, with practices, we can always succeed by doing the right things over and over again, but the learning is a little bit less. And sometimes we want that because we're optimizing. And of course, then there's sometimes we just make stupid mistakes, and that also happens. So where we want to be is in the middle, where we're experimenting and failing and succeeding about 50% of the time, and maximizing learning for that. And really, the key takeaway that I hope you have is there is no one right way. There's no silver bullet. It's really a series of small things that we massage into place to make our remote team successful. So I really encourage you to try the different tools, ask your team what they're struggling with, experiment with a bunch of stuff. I've experimented too much on my team. I must say, they were like, okay, enough tools already, enough experiments. Let's just work for a while. So you can go overboard. I have gone overboard, but it was fun in the process to try it. We learned a lot. Now to the second to the last slide, I want to let you know that on my website I've got the manager's action plan that goes over, it's like 3 pages just going all the steps for managers, and you can download that for free and just and use that. So I've put in all these steps, all the trust and all the details into this one particular plan that you can just download. So now what I'd like to do is the way we started. I'd like to end by just seeing what's your biggest takeaway today? And now this is not going to be a multiple choice. This is, you're going to have to type something in, but it could be as simple as team agreement. But I'd really be curious as to what struck a chord with the people who are here today. This is always a very tense time to see what people are going to say. Zoom, great. Tell them I sent you. They know me. Yeah, it is possible. It's totally possible. Yeah, trash Skype for business. +10. I think it's nice actually after a presentation like this to see what piqued the interest of people and what people are thinking about. So that's why I always end with this question. So I'll let this scroll on the screen, but this is all I have for you today. I hope that you got something that you'll take back to your teams. And if you try something, I would love to hear about it, even if it ends in an explosion. That's also fun to hear about and important to hear about so that I know what works and what doesn't. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope to talk with you during the rest of the conference. Thank you. Thank you.